Shalom. We are discussing Parashah Kitise, which is about the training of the priesthood, and it's also about the construction or the blueprint for the construction of the tabernacle. So the context is, this is where Moshe went up the mountain in the presence of Yahweh, receiving this information and writing it down so that he can give instructions to the people to build the tabernacle. So last time we looked at a few specific objects. Yesterday we looked at the laver and the importance of the laver and how that is the object of grace. Now, just as part of that topic, just want to close it off. If you look at the sequence of the instructions, the laver is right in the middle if you put it on a menorah pattern, and either side of that is the anointing oil and the incense, and then on the other side of that, moving from the inside out now, is the priesthood, and then the artisans, the people who created all the beautiful furnishings. And then you get on the outer, you get I think it's the oil and the Sabbath. So that's basically the basic outlay with the menorah, with the laver right in the middle, which is the center of everything. It holds the attributes of Yahweh, which is the fire pot, holding the fire of Yahweh, the holiness of Yahweh. And that holiness is about transferring holiness through the medium of water and fire, which are the two symbols associated with the laver. The water, because it was a bowl that held water for the cleansing of the priests, so that they won't die when they approach the brazen altar or the holy place. And it's also the root word associated with a fire pot, something that holds hot coals and fire. So you see both there having that symbolism, and or both symbolisms associated with the laver right in the middle, all associated with the fire, the center, and the character of Yahweh, and highlighting the importance of holiness. So the laver facilitate holiness to us, and the character of Yahweh to us. So that's yesterday's topic, stepping off there. So today I want to talk about the anointing oil, the creation of the anointing oil. And what's fascinating is that the anointing oil is measured by a shekel, a unit called a shekel. Just like you had to get a gram or a kilogram, back in the day they used the shekel. Now we started off with this Torah portion. Kitise is about lift up the heads, and it's the contribution of the people giving half a shekel, which is a silver piece, but only half a shekel is required per person, whether you're rich or poor. And that is for the atonement of the people. So that now links this shekel to the feast, or not the feast, the fast, which is Yom Kippur, the time of the sacrifice of the two goats, or two halves of a goat, because the two goats represent one offering that consists of two parts. And that's for the atonement of the nation, and in future the atonement of the nations. So the shekel is holding that symbolism, but now we see that symbolism is now transferred to the measuring of the ingredients that will be used to make the anointing oil. And every measure is measured in either 500 shekels, 250 shekels. I'm not going to elaborate on the detail on that. And the word shekel in itself is a similar concept, just like you have space and time, where space is something physical, but time is something that you can't see. The shekel is a measure that is like time. It's in a spiritual time frame, so to speak, and it divides physical things into its weight. Now, in Hebrew, the word weightiness, or to have weight, is also the word Shekinah, which is the word for glory. Now, glory, if you translate that from Hebrew, it means the weightiness. If someone has weight, it means that they have authority. I'm not talking about physical weight. I'm talking about having substance, and value. And that is where the Shekinah, the glory of Yahweh, is measured. And the shekel is measuring weight as well. So it has to do with the glory. And the anointing oil has to do with the transferring of the glory of Yahweh to the people through the means of this oil. Specifically the priesthood. Since we are on the topic of the training of the priesthood, this is also the setting up of the priesthood and the anointing of the priesthood, and the medium that is used, or the means that is used, is the symbolism of the anointing oil, which is now a spiritual entity. That's a measure of weight or a measure of glory that is placed upon the head of the priest. And we saw the same when Moshe could not deal with the people, and then 70 elders received a portion of Moshe's anointing upon their heads, and they could do the same things that Moshe did to govern the people, having prophecy and wisdom and truth, which they could convey to the people as required. In the same way, now we see the object, the oil, which is a physical substance which got measure of weight or different measures of glory, and every facet of that glory is linked to an ingredient, which is a type of glory that is now being put together, and that glory is now transferred from the spiritual into the physical upon the head of the person through the symbolism of these things. Now, one thing we need to understand is that in the physical realm, things are just two-dimensional, world of duality, and it doesn't really connect to anything spiritual. Now, how Yahweh works, he uses symbolism and objects to represent spiritual things, and then connects it to the physical. And when you interact with that physical thing, it connects you to the spiritual. It's like a little portal or some sort of a connection point which you have. And that's the way Yahweh have, let's call it the branches of the tree. Let's call it the upside down tree, where the roots, where the substance of the spiritual is now transferred down into our realm. So I believe it's a tree of life, just a symbolism. Nothing fancy or Kabbalistic in a sense. I know they've got a similar symbolism, but that's not the one I'm going to get to. I'm just talking about the two realms intersecting. And we've got the tree of knowledge planted on the world of duality upon Eretz, the earth. And we've got a tree of life planted in the spiritual, but the branches connect. I've got a little video on YouTube where I explained this on the whiteboard, I think 2 years back. And where the branches connect, that's where you get the spirit of the Torah and the letter of the Torah connecting. And that's the medium of words, the branches, and how they translate and connect. Now, in the same way, the oil is the physical substance and the glory is the spiritual, and the glory comes down and connect to the physical essence. And when you connect to that physical thing, the spiritual translates down. We also see the same symbolism within the word shekel. If you write the word shekel, like on the slide, you see the shin on top. Looks like a flame. And then you get the kuf lamed, if you read from right to left, at the bottom, which is the word kol and kal. Now, kol and kal means light and sound. The two mediums Yahweh chose to translate spiritual things into the physical, moving his glory, which is from the fundamental foundation of fire. Remember, one of the words for fire is also translated as foundation. And Yahweh is a consuming fire. The essence of his being is fire. And the symbolism of fire is the spiritual idea of holiness and glory. Now that is now translated through the shekel from the fire of Yahweh, His holiness, down through the mediums of light and sound, the kol and the kal, the kuf lamed idea, and we can access that through the weightiness or the measure of the shekel, which is the same as the Shekinah glory of Yahweh that is now translated. That same word, shekel, is also representation of the mountain, where the kuf lamed is the mountain. You see the lamed on the left, it reaches up, that's the top of the mountain, and the kuf on the right, it's reaching down. The two letters connect the lowest part to the highest part, and that's the foot of the mountain and the top of the mountain. And then above that, the fire of Yahweh rested upon the mountain, and that's when Moses met Him. It's also symbolism of Jacob's ladder, where you have this, the holiness of Yahweh above in the spiritual, and then you get the kuf lamed, which is the extension of the ladder, moving up through the lamed, coming down through the kuf, and it connects the heaven to the earth and connects us to Yahweh's glory and Yahweh's holiness. So yesterday we looked at holiness. You need to cleanse yourself lest you die. Why? It's not death because of disobedience. It's death because of impurity. If you've got darkness in you and you are saturated with darkness in a single point in time, at that point in time you stand before Yahweh. He's light, or His consuming fire will drive out all darkness, and that's the nature of light and darkness. It's just the way it is. Darkness cannot exist in the presence of light, just like humans cannot exist in the presence of a consuming fire. It will completely consume you. And the only way to stand in the presence of Yahweh is to elevate your holiness, just like Daniel and his friends who were cast into the furnace, and there was a fourth member appearing, and that allowed them to stand in the consuming fire without being consumed. Moshe stood before a burning bush, which was a fire, and the bush was not consumed. You see the same symbolism there? Because this is a spiritual fire, not a physical one, but the physical fire is symbolic of the spiritual fire or the holiness. And we see this in the word shekel, the measure shekel, which connects to the Shekinah, the glory of Yahweh. And how the glory connect to us? Through the medium of light, that's re'eh. Re'eh means insight or revelation. And it's also connecting through sound, which is the spoken word. The words spoken from the mountain, and then the spoken words, when you write them down on a scroll or a book, you need light to read them, and then you translate the spoken word from sound to the medium of light yet again, and through the eye and light you can now read the spoken word that's now been captured in the physical on parchments of leather, or the scrolls, the Torah scrolls. So that's just a bit of background there on the concept of shekel, on the concept of the anointing oil. The anointing oil represents the glory of Yahweh, the measure of the glory of Yahweh, and now that translates to His priesthood as the anointing and appointing. That's the concept of lift up your heads, which is also translated as take a census. Kitisa et rosh means to lift up the head, to appoint. It's like when you watch movies in the old days with in England, I think they still do it. They take a sword and then they knight someone. They basically elevate them to a status of authority with the term or the authority name or title called knight. In the same way, lifting up the head. Now we get the authority and title of priest. And you are now knighted or priested as someone who can facilitate work within the house of Yahweh. And this oil, just like the artisans who received an anointing to construct all these artifacts through the anointing of Yahweh, the priest, in the same way, because they sit opposite one another on the menorah pattern. If you look at the sequence of this construction. I'll send it out in the pack this weekend. You can see it for yourself. They can only do what they can do because of the glory or the weightiness of Yahweh's measure of his glory upon them. So the shekel, which is for atonement of the people, is now the shekel for the appointment and the anointing of the people through the medium of the anointing oil. And that's just a bit of background and context around the purpose of the anointing oil, how the spiritual substance connect to the physical substance, and how Yahweh's glory has now a channel or a medium to translate down to you. Now, when you read the New Testament, you hear about the tongues of fire. Yeah, that's Shavuot, the fire on the mountain, the fire on the head, the Rosh, which is also the lifting up of the head, symbolism on Pentecost. And it's also a symbol of receiving the Spirit of Yahweh. And we know if you receive the Spirit, you receive gifts, and the gifts are placed upon the heads of different people. And the gifts of the Spirit upon the people is a symbol of the appointing and anointing of the priesthood within the household. Exactly the same language. So we should take everything back to the foundation, take everything back to the origin to understand what Paul was actually talking about, because Paul had a very, very good understanding of the Torah and everything, and when he spoke, and the people also had an education in the Torah. Every Sabbath they went through the Torah cycle. So when he spoke to the people, they understood what he was talking about. Now when we read the New Testament, we've got no idea. We think Paul had a new revelation, and this new revelation is replacing the Torah, the old, that has been abolished. No, Paul is just revealing the old, or the origin, the original, in the context of the present, within the time frame of Mashiach. After his coming, the Yom Kippur sacrifice was fulfilled. The Passover sacrifice was fulfilled. And that's why there's no longer sacrifices, because every single sacrifice was fulfilled within his one single sacrifice. And we'll talk about that on Passover, when we connect the Passover to Yom Kippur through the menorah pattern. If you connect them through the branches, you'll see they are connected. So when you fulfill the one, you fulfill the other. That's now seen from the spiritual, because there is no time difference from the spiritual. For us, yes, no, it's month 1, month 7, yeah, there's a time difference. But from the spiritual, it's echad, it's one. They hang off the same branch. And the branch, remember, upside down. Spiritual, if we have a concept of spiritual is north, or spiritual is on top, and the physical is down, or the south, then the menorah is actually upside down, because the branch is the foundation, and it hangs into our realm. And we access that through the 7 lights that hang off these beautiful branch coming down from the spiritual. So that's all I have for today. I hope you have a blessed day, and I will speak to you soon. Shalom.